Welcome to Real Rockford Files, for tales of the paranormal, supernatural, and the flat-out unbelievable. Today I'm going to be sharing ghost stories from Rhode Island. Let's get into it. Story 1. I have a few stories to tell. One day I was laying in bed with my hands under my pillow when a hand just pet the top of my head. I started screaming because I was just 9 or 10 years old. My mom ran in and said, "Honey, what's wrong?" I just told her that something pet my head, and she said, "Don't worry, I'm right here." She left the door open and left the room, and I said, "Go away," to whatever it was that touched me. The next morning, I got up and the door was closed. Thinking my mom closed it, I went to open it, and it wouldn't open. I used a little more force, but it still wouldn't open, so I used two hands and tugged as hard as I could, and it swung open. I went and asked my mom if she closed the door. She said no. Another time, I was lying on the couch because I felt like sleeping on the couch. I turned towards the hallway when two blobs slowly floated from my room to my mom's room. I started to cry because this was just after the first story. My mom came to me because she heard me and she was on the computer, which was about 5 feet from me. She came over and asked what was wrong, and I looked really scared. I pointed towards the hallway and said, "Two things just floated by my room into yours." She said it was nothing and just my imagination. This all happened at my old house. I think my mom knew it was haunted, but just didn't want to scare me. A more recent story. This might sound weird, but this happens mostly in the bathroom. Sometimes when I'm in there, I hear people whisper my cousin's name, Thomas, or say, "Hey, what's up?" I get really scared, and they still talk today. Only once in a while I hear footsteps on the part of the roof I can see. Sometimes it will happen in my room. I have no idea what it could be. This just happened a few months ago. One day I was playing basketball when the ball hit the base of the hoop. It started going down a hill, and I went to go get it. I grabbed the ball and looked up. There was a shadow standing there, leaning on a tree. My house is surrounded by woods, and there was something on its head. It was dawn, so I grabbed the ball and I ran. The next day I asked my neighbor if he knew what it was. He said that Indians used to walk around the woods a long time ago, and deep in the woods a house burned down, and the two people that lived there died in the fire. Story 2. I'm Tiffany from Rhode Island. I'm 17 years old. Here are a few of my experiences. A few months ago, me, my aunt, my uncle, and my two cousins went to spend a few days at my grandmother's house in New Hampshire. It's a cozy little place and very relaxing. My aunt, uncle, and my little cousin Tyler, who was about 5 at the time, went outside to roast marshmallows. I think it was about between 9 or 10 at night. While me and my cousin were fooling around on our laptop in my grandmother's room, we had a tray set up to place the laptop on it, and we'd sit on the edge of the bed. My cousin Taylor, who is 3 years younger than me, decided to go get a few marshmallows and join the others outside. I was by myself in the room. Maybe 10 minutes had passed and I felt someone plop down on the other side of the bed. I knew nobody had come in because I would have heard the door. I got up and went outside with the others, unable to shake the creepy feeling I had. I also remember a few months prior to this experience, it was just me, my cousin Taylor, and my aunt went to New Hampshire, just the three of us. Me and my cousin were once again hanging out in my grandmother's bedroom. All of a sudden I got a horrible, awful headache. I felt like I would throw up. I left the room in search of some Tylenol. When I left the room, everything went away. No headache, no wanting to vomit. I was like, okay, and I went back in the room. It all came back all of a sudden. I left the room again and it disappeared. I found this really strange. A couple of weeks ago, I talked to one of my friends about this. She said something had probably happened in that room. I think my grandmother's house is haunted. A woman next door died a few months after she bought the house. Her name was Ida. When my uncle and his girlfriend were there, they were sleeping on the air mattress on the living room floor. He felt like someone was standing next to him, so he turned, but nobody was there. In the morning, he told his girlfriend about it. She replied, "You felt that too?" I was too scared to turn around and check. Another time, at the same house, me and my cousin were sleeping on the sun porch. Then we heard footsteps outside, back and forth, back and forth. We became freaked out. My aunt told us it was probably a dog or something, but there's a big difference between animal footsteps and a human's. We got scared, so we moved into the living room. After a few minutes of getting settled and ready to sleep, the footsteps started again outside the front door and the windows about where we were laying down. What do you think? Ghosts? Maybe the footsteps thing could have been a normal person, a stalker or something, but that doesn't explain the other stuff that's happened. Story 3. It's Tiffany again. I recently submitted some stories about my grandmother's house. Well, just yesterday, me and my friend Danielle were hanging out. We were walking around and she started talking about an old factory building where Satan worshippers would go and perform rituals. She showed me the window of a room. The whole factory is fenced off with no way in because soon it will be torn down. And under the window is spray painted the satanic symbol made to look as if it's dripping blood. We continued walking around the building and I began snapping pictures of all the broken windows. I got home and began looking at them. I noticed something in one of the windows. It looks like a demon face. I showed a few people and they also see the face. There was nothing in the room or on the ceiling, so what else could it be? I think it may be the same room as the satanic rituals were performed. The symbol was in the back of the building under the room, and I think this picture is the front of the room, believe it or not. I was also told 2 guys went in the room not too long ago and said the room had a weird feel to it. My friend Danielle is very receptive and open to the supernatural. I could be here all day listening to her experiences. She hears voices and sees things, so maybe she managed to bring this ghost out. Story 4. My name is Judea. I live in Providence, Rhode Island, and I've had paranormal encounters for a couple of years now. I was around the age 10 when a young woman started visiting me a few times a week. The girl was beautiful, but looked so creepy. She had long, dark, knee-length hair and wore a long white gown with a chain or two around her neck. I never knew how to react, but I know one thing for sure, it scared the living hell out of me. First time I ever saw her was in the basement of my old house. I was downstairs washing clothes for church the next day, and I felt as though I was being watched. So I turned around with my back against the washer and saw the woman standing in the corner of the basement. I just froze. I was in shock, yet angry at the same time. She stood there with her hands to her sides and her head back and tilted. I stood there for a few seconds and ran upstairs. I was the only one home, so I ended up going to my neighbor's house next door. As the weeks went by, I became so miserable and paranoid. I ended up seeing the woman at school. I was in 5th grade at the time. I was in gym class, and me and a few of my friends were sitting against a wall chatting away. I turned my head away for a second and saw the woman sitting on the stage step. Gym was huge and many one-step stage at the end of the gym. The woman stared at me and was walking back and forth with her hands behind her back. Another time I saw the woman, I was at my father's house in Fall River, Massachusetts. My father was asleep. I sat in the hall playing with my father's Rottweiler named Tread. I looked up, and right at the end of the hall where the kitchen leads, I see the woman standing there staring at me. I noticed that whenever I saw her, her hair was either straightened or in ringlets, or sometimes the gown she wore had polka dots on it, and always had the chain around her neck and waist as if it were a belt. The woman never harmed me, but always had me paralyzed with fear. The most action ever seen that woman was on the same day. Tread, my dad's dog, lifted his head from my lap and growled, looking at the exact direction that the ghostly woman in chains was. Story 5. Growing up, I had always been religious, and there was no doubt in my mind about heaven and hell, demons and angels, and God and the devil. On the other hand, I was extremely skeptical about spirits, ghosts, and paranormal activity in general. I just couldn't imagine that after people left us here on Earth, that they could come back to us at times. This belief was about to be seriously tested. One day, my mother informed me that a psychic medium would be at my aunt's house, and asked if I would like to go, seeing as the year before I had lost my grandmother and great-grandmother just months apart. I figured I would go, but I had reservations because I had heard a lot of scams involving psychic mediums. This one was different. He refused to hear anything about our loved ones or who we wanted to contact, and we were not permitted to say more than yes or no. We began the session, and I waited and waited for someone to show up. And just when I was giving up, he said my great grandmother appeared behind me. His physical description of her was perfect, same with her personality and health. He pinpointed the reason she died, and certain personality traits were right on the money. Some things he told me just didn't add up, though. I wrote everything he told me down and showed my parents when I got home. The things that didn't add up, they were all true. It just so happened that I didn't know about those things in her life. So how could he have known? Although I did not get to personally see my grandmother as an actual apparition, my belief in spirits is completely solid. Just knowing that she is there is enough. Hopefully one day I'll actually witness the woman who practically raised me. I feel comforted to know my grandmother really is still with me no matter where I go and what I do. Story 6. Our home was a large duplex built around 1900, and it was built by a town mill to the house workers. My grandfather worked for the mill and bought the house somewhere in the 50s to 60s. When my grandfather passed on in the late 60s, my family came to live on one side and my grandmother lived on the other until her death in the 80s. Myself and four siblings shared the apartment with our parents, and one by one, my siblings went to college, got married, etc., and they all moved away. Me, being the youngest, decided to stay with my mom and dad, live the single life, and have fun for a bit. My dad passed on in 1995, so my mom and I lived alone until I met Mrs. Wonderful in 1997. We got married, and a short time later, and stayed with my mom until her passing in 1998. All went well for a while, and then we started noticing things, just little things, disappearing, and later they would reappear in the same spot in which they were put. A few years later, I started renovating the other side of the house, and the tenants mentioned hearing things like footsteps. I just passed it up as being my grandparents checking up on the place and told the tenants not to worry as they were very nice people in life. A while later, we ended up moving to the other side as our side was in need of renovations, and we heard noises and headlights, TVs, lamps, etc. turn on by themselves, and often in pictures you can see orbs hovering over whoever was in the pictures. Well, the renovations never took place as the state passed a bunch of strict lead paint laws, and between the needed repairs and the fast rising property taxes, we decided enough is enough and had my brother put it on the market. One question I have is, should I tell the new owner about this or just wait to see if they bring it up? As I said, whatever is there never bothered anyone, but will it be different if somebody new is there? I hope it's my parents and my grandparents and not something demonic. Story 7. I moved to a new apartment in a different state. A couple of nights I'd hear a man's voice calling my name. Twice this happened at 3 in the morning, and after I woke up every day for 3 months at the same time. I'm the kind of person that when I go to bed I don't wake up until the alarm clock rings. It could thunder and I wouldn't even wake up. Then I started to find things missing and appear in places that normally I don't put them. I used to say out loud, "Who are you? What do you want? Do you need anything? I can't help you if you don't tell me." I spoke about this to a local priest and told him my situation. I asked him if he could come by and bless my apartment. After the blessing of my apartment, he told me it was just a mischievous ghost, harmless. It has been 4 months and I hadn't had any problems until last Saturday at 6:30 a.m. I heard my name being called twice. May I say that I live in a 3-story apartment building on the 3rd floor. Second floor has been empty since before I moved in, and the first floor tenants were away for the weekend. I got up and checked the door and out the window. No one was around. I'm not afraid, just don't like being called when no one was answering me when I asked them questions. So far, nothing else has happened. Before I move on to the next story, I would like to point out that a majority of my viewers aren't subscribed. If you can just take a moment and hit that subscribe button, maybe click like or leave a comment, it'll go a long way in helping me fight the algorithm. You can always take it back later, and it's totally free. Now, back to the stories. Story 8. My name is Josh. I'm 14 years old. Ever since I was 8 years old, I've been able to see and speak to ghosts. I know I'm not crazy, and I'm in all honors classes. I have anxiety disorder, but nothing else. This is not a gift. This is a nightmare. I need help, though. I get very scared and try to avoid them. It is also very embarrassing because they will just pop up, and especially living out in the woods basically is where my house is. Now, I have talked to a ghost in front of one of my trusted friends because I don't tell many people. Anyway, she said it looked like I was talking to air, but she said she was ice cold and nervous. Before I see a ghost, I get chills and tingles down my spine, then goosebumps, and then I feel like I'm going to cry. I don't particularly like telling people, but tonight, 11/19/09, at 8:15 p.m., I was walking home and saw a thing that followed me home. It had red eyes and it was hunchbacked and pale. I felt like I was going to die in its presence, and I ran home and told my mom, then started to break down and cry. I know I'm not crazy, although some people don't believe me. Again, I feel like this is not a gift, it's a curse. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Hope you enjoyed.